Legend established a foundational identity for the Roman people. They were outcasts, born from violence, and defined by a primal struggle for survival. In reality, early Rome was a small, ambitious settlement that acted as an asylum for runaway slaves and criminals. But this rising city suffered a defining trauma. Invading Gauls breached the walls, looted the treasury, and burned the streets to the ground, forcing the Romans to pay a humiliating ransom in gold just to make them leave. After watching their city burn, Roman policy shifted toward a singular objective: absolute territorial dominance. They began building a society where every citizen was a cog in a militaristic machine, operating on the belief that the only way to be safe was to conquer every neighbor before they could strike first. This obsession with security transformed the city.
Rome dedicated itself to engineering a military machine so powerful that the heart of the state would never be touched by a foreign enemy again. That machine was incredibly effective. Within a few centuries, the Roman Republic had dismantled its rivals in Carthage, crushed the tribes of Gaul, and secured the entire Mediterranean basin. However, this success created a massive geographic problem. The Republic was designed to prevent a single king from taking power, but it now required enormous armies to stay in the field for years at a time, thousands of miles away from the Senate's direct supervision. For a soldier stationed on the frontier, the Senate was a distant, abstract concept. The general standing in the camp was the person who actually provided their food, led them to victory, and promised them land for their retirement. This dynamic caused military loyalty to drift away from the state and toward the individual commanders. The very legions built to protect the Republic were now operating as independent political forces, making a massive internal conflict inevitable. Julius Caesar was the ultimate product of this corrupted system. He spent a decade conquering Gaul with a private army that answered only to him, becoming more powerful than the government he supposedly served. When he eventually marched those loyal troops into Rome, he took absolute control and pushed through popular reforms that the public actually wanted. He bypassed the gridlocked Senate to lower taxes and distribute grain, winning the genuine support of the Roman people. The Senate responded with a desperate assassination, hoping that killing Caesar would instantly restore the old republic. They failed to realize that the institutions they were trying to save were already dead, replaced by the reality of military power. Killing a dictator doesn't solve a systemic military crisis. It simply clears the way for a more capable autocrat to take the throne and finish what their predecessor started. Augustus, the first true emperor, identified the structural rot that killed the Republic, the privatization of the legions. He saw that the state could only survive if the soldier's loyalty was transferred from the individual general back to the central government. His solution was to nationalize the entire Roman military. He turned the legions into a professional state force, where every soldier served for 20 years and received a standardized salary and retirement package paid directly by the imperial treasury.
With the army's loyalty secured, Augustus halted the policy of constant expansion. He fortified the borders along the Rhine and Danube rivers, creating a permanent defensive perimeter that defined the Roman world for centuries. This stability allowed for a massive investment in infrastructure. Paved roads, sophisticated aqueducts, and colossal public buildings like the Colosseum began to rise, symbolizing a new era of centralized imperial power. Augustus bought the empire's survival by successfully professionalizing the military, ending the era of private warlords and ushering in a long period of internal peace. But the Augustan system had a hidden, fatal flaw. To protect his own life, Augustus created the Praetorian Guard, an elite military unit stationed permanently inside the city of Rome. Over the following decades, as emperors became increasingly secluded or incompetent, these soldiers realized they held the ultimate leverage. They were the only armed force inside the capital, and they physically controlled the person sitting on the throne. The guardians of the state quickly became its masters. The Praetorian Guard began murdering emperors who refused to pay them, choosing their own successors, and eventually auctioning the entire empire to the highest bidder in the palace courtyard. The balance of power had completely shifted. Political legitimacy no longer mattered. The empire belonged to whoever controlled the weapon standing closest to the emperor's door. By the 3rd century, The Roman military was almost entirely focused on fighting internal civil wars. While rival legions slaughtered each other to decide who should be the next emperor, the massive geographic borders of the state were left wide open to external threats. The empire had become too large and unstable to be managed from a single office. Emperors like Constantine finalized a radical split, dividing the state into eastern and western halves to make the administration manageable again. The empire's wealth and intellectual elite followed the power shift east, toward the new capital, Constantinople. This left the western half of the empire, including Rome itself, underfunded and militarily hollow. The Western Roman Empire was now a shell of its former self. It had been cannibalized by centuries of internal military focus, leaving it too weak to withstand a serious external shock. That shock finally came when the Huns pushed tens of thousands of Gothic refugees across the poorly defended Roman borders. These weren't just migrants, they were an armed population fleeing a greater terror. The corrupted Western state could no longer control its own territory. It was forced into a desperate cycle of appeasement, granting land and titles to these armed groups just to stop them from sacking the cities. The end came quietly in 476 AD. A Germanic military commander simply removed the last Western emperor from office and told the Senate he would be running things from now on. There was no final heroic stand. The state just ceased to function. The military machine Rome built to conquer the world and ensure its safety eventually grew so large and unmanageable that it consumed the state from the inside out. The collapse was the final stage of a system failure that began when the army became more important than the city it was built to protect.